We sang. Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with Open My Eyes, Open My Ears, Open My Heart. Open my eyes, Lord. Help me to see your face. Open my eyes, Lord. Help me to see. Open my ears, Lord. Help me to hear your voice. Open my ears, Lord. Help me to hear. Heart. Open my heart, Lord. Help me to love like you. Open my heart, Lord. Help me to love. And the first shall be last, and our eyes are open, and we'll hear like never before. And we'll speak in new ways, and we'll see God's face in places we've never known. I live within you, deep in your heart, oh love. I live within you. Rest now in me. All right, let's pray. God, we thank you so much for your presence here with us. We ask that you help us not take it for granted and to not miss out how you are opening our eyes and our ears and our hearts to the reality of you being here with us each and every moment of every day. We ask that as we open your word today, as we study about you, that you would enlighten us, that you would encourage us, inspire us, teach us something new. We thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Welcome you guys that are joining here. And we've got Pandora and Paula that are joining in too. Good to see you guys. All right. So we're going to be starting today a new book. This is called Breathing Underwater: Spirituality and the 12 Steps. And it's written by Father Richard Rohr, who's a Catholic theologian and priest, someone who's very open and ecumenical, and is one of my favorite theologians that's really helped me in my own spiritual life. I will say this kind of up front about reading Richard Rohr. He goes deep, and he's an intellectual person, and so there's a lot to chew on here. The way that he writes, sometimes you can take a sentence and you can just say, okay, let me think about this for a while. So this is not one of those books that you just kind of move through quickly. You might find yourself kind of like having to stop and think about what he's saying. And there's a lot of really great stuff, and occasionally you'll find yourself in kind of a some thoughts are so complex that it's like, what what are you saying? So we'll probably experience some of that as we go through it. But it is overall as a concept, I think this is a great book to basically look at the gospel and the 12 steps as being the same thing. What we're looking at is we're looking at being transformed as people from the inside out. That's what the gospel is supposed to be. And that's what the 12 steps are supposed to be. Now, the 12 steps are popular and well known for focusing in on a particular area of life as a starting point in terms of what we feel like needs to be changed, whether it's AA or NA or, there's a lot of groups that will use the 12 steps. And primarily, the 12 steps are also connected with addiction. And what we'll see here is that the idea behind this book is that when you look at the gospel and we look at the problems that we face in life as people of faith, they could be categorized as addictions, or the addictions can be pointing us to kind of the deeper places in us that needs the healing. So the concept is really great, I think. So I think what we'll do today is we're going to start with the introduction. And the introduction is it's actually one of the bigger sections. If we're going to go chapter by chapter or step by step of the 12 steps, we're going to see the introduction is a little bit on the bigger side. But I think it's good for us to start with this just to kind of get an idea of what is it that we're going to be doing with this 12-step process. So we'll be doing a lot of reading from the book. Usually when I go through a book, I'll go through and I'll highlight stuff that stands out to me. And so that's kind of the stuff that I'm going to be bringing up. But I want to encourage you, any point along the way, if you have a question or you want to make a comment, you're more than welcome to. And hopefully some of this stuff that I've highlighted is going to be good conversation starters. So for the last couple years, our Bible studies have been this interesting mix of people and online, and so we're still working with that. So right now it looks like that we've got Diane joined us here also. So you who are joining at home or joining online, I want to encourage your comments and questions as well. And Diane is saying, I hope you can explain some philosophy. So there's, when you read Richard Rohr, you can see, he could be categorized as a philosopher. But I welcome and encourage you who are online to, put your comments and your questions in here as we go along too. There's a little bit of a delay, but it's not big. It's 15 seconds or something like that. So we should be able to kind of stay on the same page. So let's start with our introduction, and we're going to just kind of look at the gist of what we're talking about here. So there is a link between the wisdom of the 12-step program and what St. Francis called the marrow of the gospel. So Richard Rohr is Franciscan, so that's part of the order within the Catholic Church that he's familiar with. You may know St. Francis of Assisi. And so St. Francis talked about the marrow of the gospel. You can imagine that's the real meat of it. That's the real gist of the gospel. And what we'll see here in the introduction is that Rohr describes, and I agree, that I think oftentimes the gospel has been kind of turned into something that maybe it wasn't meant to be originally. Jesus wasn't necessarily trying to start a religion. Jesus wasn't trying to point people to himself so much. If you notice in the teachings of Jesus, he's teaching people about the kingdom of God, or he's teaching people about God. And he's pointing people to the kingdom and to God. He's usually not pointing people to himself. But Christianity, as we'll see here in the introduction, the gospel has become, it's all about Jesus. And you have to believe about Jesus a certain way and worship him in a certain way. And if you were following Jesus when he was going through his ministry, he wasn't saying, come to me and worship me and believe that I am this and that and the other, even though there are parts in there. So there's this what is the marrow of the gospel? That's something that I think is good for us to really think on as we're going through this book, is what really is the gospel all about. So we'll be considering that. The purpose of the 12 steps is transformation. And so we can see this is the whole kind of the point of the 12 steps and the gospel. The title of this book is taken from this poem by Carol Bialik. And why don't we look at that real quick. So this is the poem that the title of this book is based on. I built my house by the sea, not on sands, mind you, not on shifting sand, but I built it of rock, a strong house by a strong sea. And we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbors. Not that we spoke much, we met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand our barrier, always the sand between. Then one day, and I still don't know how it happened, the sea came without warning, without welcome even. Not sudden and swift, but a shifting across the sand like wine, less like a flow of water than a flow of blood, slow but coming, slow but flowing like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought the sea crept higher till it reached my door, and I knew then there was neither flight nor death nor drowning, that when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbors, well acquainted, friendly at a distance neighbors, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater. So just for a moment, we'll turn our time together into a literature class and look at this poem. Does anybody feel like that this concept resonates with you in any way?
Well, at first I read it and I didn't understand it. I was like, what is she talking about? But then as I thought about it, I'm like, it's like life. You know, we're fine and things are over there, and then all of a sudden they're not. And they're right on top of us, and we have to learn to breathe through it.
Right. That's absolutely right.
You either deal with it or you die.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. By saying,
and it says there aren't options. You can't run, you can't drown. It has become a part of who you are. Yeah. So you have to adjust.
And like the learning to breathe underwater obviously does not literally mean to learn to breathe underwater. It means to deal with it.
Right. So we can think about, and this is a part of going through these steps, and looking at it as personal gospel transformation. The things that we're going to be looking at are the parts of our lives that have been affected by this major change. So if we think about our lives when everything changed, sometimes we could, depending on our situations, we could probably pinpoint a moment in time, an experience, something connected to a relationship, a certain age that we were, or you know, sometimes there's specific traumatic experiences that is the sea suddenly is not over there, but is suddenly you're in it, you're under it. So those can be different things. They could have started very early in life. They could have happened in the middle or later on. They could have been a few major things that have happened, and those are kind of the life changes that we've experienced. Or it could be that we've just got like a whole lot of them. Maybe we're losing count of those things in our life. I remember going through a grief recovery book, and one of the exercises was for you to make a grief timeline and to look at your life and say, start at the beginning and just go back and kind of play through each year of your life. And if you come to a certain place where you experience some kind of loss, put it in your timeline, put it in your grief timeline. So it takes a while, to go through them. Sometimes the big ones will come first. Maybe it's the death of someone, or, some kind of a major traumatic event of loss of different types. But when we think about the sea coming and being a part of us, part of it is going to be these events. We'll associate it with these events. I always, my foundational traumatic events are the passing of my mother. So just before then, it was a little traumatic. We moved from Tennessee to Georgia, and I had just turned 12. And so that's, those are big things to all the friends that you remember and all the life that you've known. When you're 12, you're kind of at a place where you're remembering things, you're going to remember 12 later on. So that was hard, but absolutely nothing like losing mom. So for me, I've got kind of those are the moments where, for me, if I'm thinking about when did the sea cross over and stop being over there, we all grow up knowing that there are dangers in life and bad things can happen, and we may even see bad things happening, whether it's on the TV or our neighbors or even family. We can see these things happening, and we can learn how to navigate through life and avoid those things, to make good decisions and have certain things not happen to us. And I think we learn that. But at some point, I remember thinking of it as in terms of like life kind of kicking you. And there's other words you can use that are stronger than kick. But at some point, usually we know everybody's going to experience it to some degree. Nobody makes it through life unscathed. And if you do, there's probably, I don't know, you're probably on some other level of of reality, but everybody has that experience where life kicks you, sometimes associated with something traumatic, but maybe it could even just be at some point in life you just realize, oh my God, I'm underwater. And you don't know when it started or what happened. You just know, wow, I'm underwater. And there is no getting away from it. And I think what we do is we try to figure out ways so that this is not a reality for us. And probably this is where the addictive stuff comes in. Because usually what we try to do is we try to cope with living underwater, because we don't want to accept that this is the way reality is. We want to say, no, I want to go back to before the sea came, or I don't want to breathe underwater. I want to swim. I want to float. I want to go somewhere else. And I think we try to get away from that. So it's kind of pinpointing where we've experienced that in our lives, and then it's asking ourselves, what does the gospel say to that? What is the gospel for? All right, so that's the introduction here. As an organizational consultant and psychotherapist, Ann Wilson Schaaf said many years ago, our society itself shows all the signs of classic addiction. I began to wonder whether addiction could be one very helpful metaphor for what the biblical tradition calls sin. All right, so sin, like addiction, as a disease, a very destructive disease. So what might be how we can see these do connect, that addiction and sin do seem to be the same? And maybe what are some ways that we haven't associated those two things before? Behavior?
Yeah.
Which one?
Sin or disease, sometimes the behavior, I think sometimes the behavior can be sinful, and if we're sinning, sometimes the behavior can be something that we keep repeating over and over, like an addiction.
Gotcha, right.
So I think it can go either way.
So it's kind of behavior we can't stop.
We need help
Right,
for either a sin or a disease.
right.
When I first became a Christian, I would read Proverbs, because I thought they were talking about me all the time. Because it's all full of, what sin is. and
The
what not to
proverb
do.
talks about the fool a lot, because that's kind of the teaching of Proverbs is about wisdom, and it's about not just being smart, but it's having kind of like the wisdom of God, knowing the way that God operates in this world and the way that God has created this world for us. And if we can know the mind of God, the heart of God, and let that kind of be our own heart, then we're wise. And if we don't live that way, then we're foolish. So yeah, they don't spare anybody's feelings with the wise and the foolish, and they'll go into detail with how ridiculous and horrible the life of a fool can end up becoming. Yeah. And yeah, if we're honest, we do see ourselves in that,
Perhaps I look at it this way, I think we ignore some of the things within ourselves that we see in other people, especially when we're saying things about people that, we're pointing it out. Yeah, it's really something that's within ourselves, because we only see things in others that we truly have with ourselves, and some of us have buried them pretty deep. It's, I'm not that bad, I didn't steal $1 million, but I did steal a package of chiclets out of the Walmart. So, if you're looking at breaking commandments or whatever it is, it doesn't matter, it's just a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you can understand a degree, I always found that when I was going through that myself, and I just remember the one thing there, I asked what truth meant, what is truth? In other words, what is really true? And it says, make no excuse for no wrongdoing. In other words, make no excuse for wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
You say, oh, that wasn't that bad, or, I'm not as bad as that person, but anything you do you wouldn't want to have done to yourself.
That's very good. The introduction here talks about being honest with ourselves and being able to see what's going on deep inside of us. And the thing about addiction and the thing about sin is that in a lot of ways it covers up what's really, really going on inside of us. So there can be things that we find ourselves doing, like our behavior, find ways that we are thinking, and if we find those things to be often repeated, if we find ourselves, it's easy, for example, to make fun of other people or to put other people down. So it's probably one of the reasons why reality shows are as popular as they are. And before reality shows, we had, talk shows. So oftentimes what would happen is we would bring in and spotlight other people and then spend our time judging them. If you watch a reality show, you can be like, oh, I hate her. I can't stand her. She's such a backstabber, or, he's so two-faced, or, That person is not trustworthy at all. So when we're watching reality shows, that's the basis of what it's all about. There's the Housewives shows have been so popular and have gone to so many different cities with so many different cultures of people, but you go through and you find it's fun to talk about these problems that these people are going through, and you can see them coming along the horizon once you kind of know the personalities of the people, you know who's going to do what. So it's easy for us to look at other people and other people's lives and to figure out what's wrong. It's, and we can talk amongst ourselves and say, are you seeing what I'm seeing when she says this and when she does that? And so it's easy to point it out in each other.
I was just listening to everybody and thinking, I think one of the hardest things is to recognize and acknowledge, like what's going on with us. Like a lot of times I have honest self-deception. I really don't see it in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just what you're talking about, I'll look at other people and I'll compare myself and I'm not that bad or I didn't do that. And what I've learned to try and do or to remember is to identify, not compare myself, but to identify with what they're going through or the feelings. And, I think we all do things. We come from different places and act out on, the best that we know how. Sometimes we don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, like learning to get honest with myself it's hard sometimes. And sometimes I don't want to look at me, because I really can't.
It's interesting that you say, it sounds like what you try to do when you recognize that you're judging somebody else is to try to switch into like more of a compassionate mode or an empathetic mode. Is that right?
But for the grace of God go I, like if I see somebody.
Like that could be me.
Yeah, and I don't know what they're going through or what kind of day they've had.
Right.
Or, I don't always do that, but I try to catch myself doing
Right.
that,
Because what that made me think, that's interesting, because if we allow ourselves to be compassionate and empathetic to somebody else, that probably will come in handy when we start to put the mirror on ourselves and really start discovering these dark stuff that we haven't wanted to admit. You're probably going to, at some point, need that compassion, the same compassion that you had for somebody else, to have it for yourself.
And I can't love somebody else.
Right. It's like, and sometimes it's easier to give somebody else a break and to extend grace to them, and not so much to let ourselves be extended grace.
Inside of my core, sometimes like I think that I might appear a certain way to you, or I think that somebody's perception of me is different than how I really feel, or what I think my perception of me is, but I want you to like me or think that I'm a good person, or,
Right.
even though I think I am, I fall short every day. So many
Yeah, we all do.
and I know you do.
The way I read that up there, they're saying that the word addiction is definitely the same as is related to sin. I don't think all addictions are bad. I think there are some very good addictions. And to say, well, addiction to eating healthy. Oh, I don't want that junk food. I'd rather eat this healthy food. I know that when, like, we come to church almost every Sunday, and if we miss a Sunday, it's a big empty part. There's a big hole on that day. It's like, we spend the rest of the week trying to get ready for the next Sunday to try and take in more of what we missed. So I don't agree with the thing where he began to wonder whether addiction could be one very helpful metaphor for what the biblical tradition called sin.
Right.
So they're kind of implying that addiction is sin. Well,
so I think it's probably good for us, and probably good to do this early. I think there is going to be a line between the things that we do habitually that are healthy and beneficial to us, and the things that we do habitually that are destructive, but we do them anyway. So I think when we're talking about, at least in this book, when we're talking about addiction would be doing things habitually and not being able to really stop, or it being extremely difficult to stop, even though it's ultimately bad for us.
Well,
So like,
not being able to stop and also not being helpful to you, is like being addicted
Right.
to drugs or alcohol. Yeah, it may feel good at the time, but
right.
in the long run,
Now there is going to be some stuff that some addictive things are obviously bad. You know, if we're honest, sugar is highly addictive and ultimately destructive, because if we look at one of the biggest causes of health problems, a lot of it is related to sugar, and it's like, not only can we personally be addicted to it, but it's basically this drug that's one of the most popularly sold and a part of our yeah, smoking is another one that's highly addictive. And then if you look at the, you know, what is physically addictive, try to not eat any sugar for a week. Just try. And you will realize we are completely addicted. We cannot stop. I've done a couple of the diets where you have carbs completely out, which includes sugar, and when you realize you have this capacity to find sugar in stuff. I remember looking at an onion that was sitting in the refrigerator, and I never thought there was but there's a lot of sugar in an onion, and I could tell after a while. I was crazy. I could have sat there and just ate the whole thing because I was so. But then now here's the other part. The other part is there are things that we can do that are addictive, or that can become habits that are positive things. You know, say like, you know, you do some exercise. That's a good thing to have as a habit. Or if you're, you know, used to drinking a certain amount of water every day, or, you know, there are other things. And then there's going to be this really gray area where we look at, like, work, for example. Having a good work ethic is good. You know, using your time to work is a positive thing. But work can be something that's addictive. In other words, work can go from being something that's healthy and productive to being something that's taking up too much of your life. You know, you should work a certain amount during. If somebody's working and it's making them not spend any time with their family, not do anything for personal recreation or pleasure, not get rest, then it's a negative thing.
They're buffering because they don't want to feel emotions, so they just go to work.
You can use so you can use that. So we could actually use exercise as a way of getting away from something, or it could be that we're using the exercise to help process it. So there's going to be a fuzzy or kind of a gray area that we'd have to kind of.
But there's another side of compassion. I said to my son, "Are you very compassionate?" He said, "Mother, I'm a doctor. I have to be compassionate." No.
Right.
He's all wrong.
Right.
But that was his way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Addiction actually is a dependency when you come right down to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know myself, when I went to do personal inventory. We don't think anything's wrong with ourselves. When we look in the mirror, we can go about it. I had things I was addicted to that I didn't even realize I was addicted to. One of the things you gotta remember with an addiction, when you remove something, you gotta replace it with something. There's a space, it's in the Bible. Remember, when you sweep the house out, in other words, 14 other sins enter into your life. In other words, 14 other addictions, people that quit smoking, all of a sudden start eating candy and eating stuff and gain weight because they've replaced that addiction with another addiction.
Right.
I found, now this may sound, I don't know, but well, this is religious. The one thing that got me off all addictions without any type of help. I mean, I used to smoke. I was like 2 packs a day since I was 14 years old. I didn't realize it was to excessive to the degree that I looked at it. In other words, and it wasn't the drinking so much, it was the companionship that you went with it. In other words, that you go out and it was automatic. You have a cocktail somebody offers you one, have a beer somebody offers you one, you don't realize it. One of the things I found, and this is the thing that I found, that when I looked at it, I said, what are you going to replace it with? I had some very good counseling. And at that time, it was a religious one. I said, replace it with the Holy Spirit. Let the Holy Spirit be your guide. In other words, the whole and perfect Spirit of God. Let that be your guide. So, and you go to that every single time you feel that urge. And I am just making this a testament, in other words, myself. I gave up coffee, gave up smoking, gave up any types of alcohol. And then I went through an inventory of what I ate. Every single thing that I ate, I wondered if it was something that I had to have all the time, or if it was something I liked to do. And you do an inventory. And anytime you find something, you replace it with that there, and it gives you even more willpower, not even willpower. It was, how can you quit cold turkey like that after all those years? I won a lot of money, let's put away that. I could give up smoking. They've known me since all my life. It's gone. And it wasn't because I felt it was bad for me. And I don't believe that, the commercials I look at and so what. It was because I was dependent on something other than God. And with that Robert Palmer singing song, I said, what is the one thing you should be addicted to? Addicted to love. Remember that song? I'm addicted to love. And when you become addicted to love, really what love is truly about, to me that's a great addiction.
Well, usually the things that we do find ourselves to become addicted to that are ultimately bad for us, there's something usually that's driving us toward that. It's used as a means to kind of to either cope with or to not feel something. So let's keep going here, and let's think about again sin and addiction. So usually, I think when we think of sin, at least as I've thought of sin, growing up in the church, sin is usually like a list of these don'ts, a list of the things that we should not do. And it's a list of things that would be destructive for us or destructive for somebody else. And so if we sin, it's because we choose to do something that's on the list that probably we know that we shouldn't do. So usually when we think of sin, it's that making bad choices. Addiction is a little different than that. Addiction is not. If someone says, "I know that I am addicted to X, Y, or Z," at some point they're saying, like, "I'm not choosing to do this anymore. I have to do this." Now, some people, the famous thing is, "Oh, I can quit anytime." But I just choose not to. Well, the only way you can prove that that's correct is to actually quit something or to stop doing something. So this is saying that sin is like something that we can't stop doing. Not so much that we are willingly choosing to do the wrong thing. We're choosing to lie, or we're choosing to steal something, or we're choosing to whatever. It's not that. Instead, sin is like there are certain things that we do in life that we just can't stop ourselves from doing. So that's the connection here, and that's where we are looking at it as a disease. It's a disease because there's something broken inside of us. There's something dysfunctional or out of whack inside of us that's making us to say these things and do these things that maybe we don't want to, but we just can't help it. We just find ourselves doing it. So that's kind of where. So before we go on, let's see here. Paula says it's interesting to compare our addictions to sin, even those that would be considered bad in our society, say maybe shopping, etc. Anything that interfere in your relationship with God could become addiction or sin. So that's the thing to ask ourselves is like, I can't stop myself from turning on the TV. I can't stop myself from picking up my phone. I can't stop myself from going shopping. I can't stop myself from whatever. That's kind of where we're going here when we're thinking about the sin as addiction. All right, the New Testament called it salvation or enlightenment. The 12-step program called it recovery. The trouble is that most Christians pushed this great liberation off into the next world, and many 12-steppers settled for mere sobriety from a substance instead of a real transformation of the self. We have all been the losers as a result, waiting around for enlightenment at gunpoint, which is death, instead of enjoying God's banquet much earlier in life. So a lot of what we can do is we can get to a place where we stop doing the bad thing. You talked about, stop smoking or stop drinking caffeine. So we often can stop ourselves from doing that. And maybe if we're looking at sinful things, maybe a person stops themselves from gossiping or stops themselves from lying to other people. But the thing that Roar is saying is that we need to make sure that we don't believe that it's not until we die that we ultimately can be healed from that. So just because you stop something doesn't mean you're healed. It doesn't mean you stop hurting. So when we carry pain with us, pain of the experience of life, when we carry that around with us, usually that's the trigger that creates these addictive and sinful behaviors. We can stop doing the behaviors, but then this doesn't get healed, and this doesn't get changed and transformed. So we still carry the pain or the bitterness or the unforgiveness or the brokenness, and we just say, when I die, it'll finally be over. But I won't engage in these addictive things now because that'll make it more complicated. But then we're missing out on the good news of the gospel, which is there's healing for us. We can be changed inside. And the amazing thing is that when you are changed inside, you're not triggered by these sinful addictive things, because you're not trying to hide anything or to mask a feeling or to feel something else if we've been healed. So that's that has faith to believe. It takes faith to believe that's that can happen. It takes faith to believe you really can have a transformed life, because I think it's easy for us to go through life thinking like, well, it's just gonna suck. Just just keep going, just deal with it, you know, instead of really believing we can experience God's healing inside of us. It might take time, and it might be really, really uncomfortable to figure out how that healing can take place. But that's the thing that we're looking for. All right, let's see here. All right, so we're going to kind of move toward the first step. There's a section called going toward pain. And that's not anything anybody wants to hear. Toward the pain, what are you talking about? If the house is on fire, you run away. You don't run into the inferno. But that's what this is talking about. So, the 12-step program is not a worthiness contest. There's only an absolutely necessary starting point, and that's the experience of powerlessness. That's where it must all begin. So this is the part that's weird about the way that God set this life up. So when we experience the pain, when we find ourselves drawn to sinful or addictive behavior or ways of thinking or living that will help us to cope with the pain, but that ultimately ends up bringing us more pain, even though we may not feel it for a moment, when the moment passes, it's going to feel worse than it did before. When we would think we need to get to a place where we finally can get control of ourselves, to get control of our lives. And actually, step one is the opposite of that. It is not step one, get control of your life. I mean, otherwise, if that were the case, it would be the one-step program, right? Because you wouldn't need to do anything else. Get control of your life. Well, that's actually what we do with the sinful and addictive behavior. It's a way to control. We're controlling the pain by popping the pill or drinking the something or go. Nowadays, in the past couple decades, electronics have provided these otherworldly experiences that we didn't have before. Sometimes the closest thing we had before was like books and then plays and then movies. Those were like kind of immersive experiences where we can get away from the pain of our life and just live some other thing for a while, just to get a break from it. But what happens is that when we can't stop ourselves from doing that over and over again, maybe it doesn't happen as much, but I remember back in the day, there are people that they never stop reading. You pick up a book and they're always in this book, and it's going off into some otherworldly place, and it's engaging in some way, but it's not kind of the here and now reality. I had one of my best friends from seminary. He was definitely addicted to movies, and this was back in the Blockbuster days, and he'd come home with a stack, and within a couple days he'd be taking them back and get another stack, and it was a couple movies a day at least, and then on the weekends going out, and I spent a lot of time watching movies with him, but that was his addiction of choice. That was this escape, and it could be different escape. It could be a romantic escape or this action escape, but it's easy to sit in front of the TV It's easy to, there's, we joke about it, with stupid Netflix. You can, instead of getting stuck watching a movie, it's like, I gotta watch this whole series, and it's like 8-10 hours, and it's like 10 hours of my life is gone. And can I press stop and not let it go to the next episode? Can I? Or am I trapped in this thing? So
Enlightening.
sure.
Now Netflix won't let you share your password. They're cracking down on that, big time.
Well, they want to see the money come in
That's right.
that matches the addiction that's taking place.
Addictions.
There's been court cases, and it's been in the media for a while, that the way social media is set up is it's meant to be addictive. It is physically, mentally, emotionally, does the same thing that heroin does or that alcohol does. It's messing with the same hormones or receptors or whatever in the brain is happening with social media. So I can find myself watching YouTube and suddenly, where did the afternoon go? You know? Or you can get on Facebook, Instagram, and it's just one thing after another. TikTok, you know, it's like, who knew that like 10, 15-second videos could be so addictive? But it's like all the really good, funny, interesting stuff back to back to back to back to back to back to back, and it doesn't stop. So we say to ourselves, just get control of it, and that'll fix it. And what we realize is that we are powerless. Ultimately, if we do, like Jay said, inventory ourselves, if we look at our lives, we will be able to find something that we are addicted to, something that we keep going back to, that is not that great for us, that something else could be, something better could be there. So what is it that we're afraid of? Next paragraph. Is it the human pain that we are afraid of? Yes, that's a big part of it. So it's absolutely essential that we find a spirituality that reaches to that hidden level. So what we manage to do as people is we manage to hide or be in denial of the pain that we do experience. So who wants to admit, you know, I'm lonely, I'm hurt, I'm angry? Who wants to admit it? Who wants to say it? Who wants to face that? I mean, it's hard. Yeah. So finding a spirituality that will help us to pinpoint what is it inside of us that we might be broken about or disappointed about. Being able to have a spirituality that will see it, but also a spirituality that will help to bring healing for it. That's what the gospel is supposed to be. That's what 12 steps are supposed to do as well.
Make you happy, they're what you want to do. So you really don't want to stop. Bottom line, yeah.
Right? You don't want to. Why would I want to not feel good? This stuff is making me feel good. Why would I deny myself feeling good? And ultimately, the reason why we would is if we recognize that, yes, we feel good, but ultimately it may not really be good for us.
Good answer.
It's not enriching our lives.
Right.
Well,
We
it's keeping you
want...
from your responsibilities.
Right, it'll make us avoid responsibilities. It will, if we get in the habit of finding these tricky ways to feel good all the time, then what can happen is we can end up going through life in a way that's really not balanced or realistic. I mean, life is not all happy,
Well,
everything
sooner or later you're
happy
gonna
and
get-
exciting and all of this all the time.
Sooner or later, you're gonna get thrown a curveball, and it's gonna be like, wow, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. But
Right.
probably because you've been so busy being happy, happy, happy all the time that you didn't realize what was going on around you. And then something unfortunate, bad hits your life, and it's the worst, to you, it's the worst thing that ever happened. And the rest of the world is kind of going like,
What's,
really, you didn't see that
what's the
coming?
big deal? Right. Right, so it will, by spending more of our energy in addictive or sinful things that feel good and get us away from the reality of what we don't want to feel, putting more and more effort into that will make it harder once the next thing comes to really face it, because we're gonna have to work that much harder to feel good and that much harder to escape because things got even worse. So, all right, let's see. With our last few minutes, I don't know how close we'll be to finishing the intro. Let's see. Okay, I think this is good for us to look at. This is the paragraph beginning with, "We are all spiritually powerless." However, and not just those physically addicted to a substance, which is why I address the book to everyone. Alcoholics just have their powerlessness visible for all to see. The rest of us disguise it in different ways and overcompensate for our more hidden and subtle addictions and attachments, especially our addiction to our way of thinking. Now this is one that we're probably going to need to keep coming back to over and over again, because this is one of the biggest things, is getting addicted to our way of thinking. And maybe it'll take us a while to unpack that over time, but this is probably, this is one of the things that we should pay attention to. This is saying that we can be addicted to a certain way of thinking, but nobody would know it, because that's going on in your head. Unless you tell somebody, you can kind of keep it to yourself. So if we're going through life and we're dealing with pain in a certain way, and we're using our thinking in ways that are not healthy and productive and healing, then we can get addicted to that, just as if we could get addicted to some kind of a physical substance. All right. If we skip to the section, the vital spiritual experience. So, in order for us to experience freedom, enlightenment, recovery, wholeness, what we're looking for is vital spiritual experience. You mentioned earlier, probably when we're going after these feeling experiences, we're probably, what we really want is vital spiritual experience. So if we experience this life the way God has created it to be experienced, where it is just full of vibrancy and it includes everything that can be experienced in life. So it can include the things that are painful or tough or the challenges. But if we can experience the vitality of life, the way that God has created it for us, then those things can even be in the mix, and we will enjoy life. When people have bonds between themselves, either a really good friend or someone that ends up becoming, a lover, a spouse, somebody, a significant other, usually within those relationships, there's friction and challenge. And so we're really not wired to want everything perfect and everything exactly the way I want it from the other person. We're usually attracted to people, again, spouse or friend, somebody who is pretty different than us. And probably because there's challenge in that, because it's not the easy way. It's kind of the hard way, but it's more fun. So you can actually have a friend that'll call you out on your stuff, that will make fun of you, that doesn't think like you. And those kind of friendships can be the most vital and vibrant and life-giving. And you wouldn't think that. You would think what you want is somebody who thinks like I think, and they like what I like, and they laugh at what I laugh at, and we never argue. And you would think that's what we'd be attracted to, but actually that's boring to us. We want something that's very different. So
that person helps keep you tied to reality.
Right. And we help ourselves experience the fullness of life. I mean, there are things that I wouldn't choose to experience in life that I am experiencing because of my wife, because she's living her life and she drags me into her life, and I end up doing stuff with her that I never would have done on my own. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? This makes life better. I wouldn't have eaten this and seen this and done this and gone here if it weren't for that. And she'll say the same thing about me, that she didn't think a certain way or whatever until we got together. So we're looking for a vital spiritual experience, a real life-giving experience. And along the way, there are challenges that get in the way of that. And part of that is the sinfulness or addiction. So I think along the way we probably get hurt, disappointed, and then we end up not wanting to engage the full life experience, and instead we want to just have the frosting or just have the good stuff and not have the whole package. Let's do this. Why don't we pick up here when we meet together next time, and then we will plow through into the first step. But we'll pick up with the vital spiritual experience when we get together next time. And this is, we talked about this a little bit. Usually when we think of 12 steps or we think of the gospel, we think of getting rid of the bad stuff. That's purgation. We purge this bad stuff. But what they're saying here is that oftentimes it just ends there. So you ever had a church experience where they just want to focus on sin and get you forgiven from your sin, and then that's it? And then instead of the next two things, which is after getting rid of these addictive bad things, it's kind of like what Jay, you were saying, you're going to have an empty space there. That needs to be filled with illumination, new insight into life, and then ultimately union with God, union with the God in us and around us, and that's that vital spiritual experience that we're looking at. Not to just stop doing the bad stuff, and church can become a club, the Let's Stop Doing Bad Stuff club, and we're all here, and we're just like, that's all we talk about. We talk about, life is so hard, and I keep doing this, and I keep doing that. Oh yeah, me too. And then, well, let's support each other. So we stop doing bad stuff. Okay, I got your back and you got my back. Let's stop doing bad stuff. And it can work, but then you can find what it says here is then we can end up being a bunch of dry drunks, which is like we stopped doing the bad stuff, but now we're just kind of like, we're bored and we're antsy and it's like we're not fulfilled. And I'm not going to tell anybody, but man, I would really love to do some bad stuff right now. But I'm in the let's stop doing bad stuff
Like
club,
Jay said,
and I know they're going to
something
kick
to
me
fill
out
that.
if I
Yeah, we need something to fill that gap.
we need the stuff to fill the gap. So that's where the full 12 steps is important. All right, Margaret, good to see you. Said joined a little bit late, but well, it'll be recorded so we can go back and listen to it later. So, all right, not too bad for our first time together. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May each thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out in your Spirit, Lord, we pray. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May each thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out